He came in a very interesting, controversial time for Home Depot's history, and he has this incredible success that he's had. So I'll give you a little bit of Frank's background. If you don't know who Frank is, he's just an amazing human. He's been a great mentor of mine. And just, I think about 2 weeks ago, I had an interview, or I was spending some time with Ed Bastian, the current CEO of Delta, and Raphael Bostic, the current Federal Reserve President of Atlanta, in a discussion. And Ed has said this multiple times, that his greatest mentor in his life has been Frank Blake. And Frank was the non-voting executive chairman of Delta and was forced into retirement because of age. I don't know whenever all this longevity stuff, they're gonna finally update the SEC compliance rules for publicly traded companies. It's a whole nother topic. But Frank has had an incredible and storied career. He was born and raised in Boston. He did his undergrad at Harvard, and then he earned his JD down the street in Columbia. As I mentioned, he was a former chairman of Delta, which is, if you don't know, and those of you in India, it's the largest airline in the entire world at the busiest airport in the entire world here in Atlanta. He's the board of director member of the Aquarium, Procter & Gamble, Macy's, board of trustees here at All Women's College, Agnes Scott, which is an incredible university here. And I think from a storied standpoint, he was the former chairman and CEO of Home Depot. And he came in a very interesting, controversial time for Home Depot's history. And he has this incredible success that he's had at Home Depot before, during, and after the 2008 crash. So we might hear a little bit about that and how that whole process was. Prior to that, he was bored, so he did some public service as the Deputy Secretary of Energy. And prior to that, coming from that experience at GE, not only GE Power, but doing a lot of mergers and acquisition under Jack Welch, and also worked with Bob Nardelli during that time frame. He was the Senior Vice President and Corporate Business Development Head at GE during that time frame. He was the General Counsel of the EPA, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and Deputy Counsel to, at the time, Vice President George Bush, and was a law clerk for the U.S. Supreme Court Justice John Stevens. Without further ado, Frank Blake. So Frank and I got to spend some time in a program called CDL, Creative Destruction Lab, which was hosted at Georgia Tech, where he was a sponsor, and we got the opportunity to mentor a wide variety of technology companies and entrepreneurs that were coming up with ideas. They were a little bit further along. They had their idea, they had their device or technology or innovation, and they were trying to commercialize and scale those ideas. And Frank took a lot of time out of his busy life to be able to spend time. And so we got to spend a lot of time together and have fun at Georgia Tech with a lot of those companies in that program. That program still exists, but not at Georgia Tech, but it's all around the world at some of the top universities from that standpoint. I've been doing this talk even before Hive for almost 15 years. We've had incredible leaders, mentors, coaches, investors who've kind of given their wisdom and perspective over the years on our company, market issues, what's been going on, leadership lessons. But what's, I think for me personally, the most important is like origin story. And we went through briefly about your background, but I'm always fascinated by the influences before your background, whether it's your parents or grandparents or influences or mentors that you had as a kid growing up. Any thoughts and perspectives on who those people were in your life?
Gee, that's interesting. So I've done a lot of it. No one's ever asked me that. I was blessed by going to I come from Boston, grew up in the Boston area. I went to the same grammar school that John F. Kennedy went to. And it was just a great grammar school. And there was the banner in the school was our best today, better tomorrow. And it was just a very unique environment that was both demanding, but also, I mean, it was engaging. And from then, and it's so interesting how much kind of that base of what you get early on in education, sort of builds habits and all the rest. So that would be the number one. That would be the number one influence.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated because the evolution of education is just accelerating. There is this, if you haven't checked out, there's a school, primary school based in Texas, where they're now spending just 2 hours on a computer with AI to rapidly learn, and they're getting multiple grades ahead of their peers. And they've got more guides as opposed to teachers. So the rest of the time that they spend in the classroom is how to present, how to do discussion, how to think critically, how to do problem solving, the soft skills that a lot of us, struggle with. And that becomes a primary focus of the education program. And if you kind of see from there to now, what are some of those things that it doesn't really matter what the newest technology or newest gadget that we're going to be using for learning, what are some of those core principles maybe from back then that even apply to your life or you see from an educational standpoint today?
First off, I think that's fascinating. I mean, and I don't know anything about it other than anecdotally, but it is really true. In fact, at breakfast this morning, I was with one of the IT leaders of one of our large public companies here in Atlanta, and we were talking about that very topic about what is it that they are now looking for in their IT department. This is a little bit of it comes a long way around the barn door to responding to your question. But bad analogy, but I'm going to use it anyways. The analogy is in terms of being able to build the problem and the answer to the problem, the key skill set now will be to express the problem in as coherent a form as possible, and then to iterate on the problem, and then to be able to communicate the solution and meet the, get the problem and the need better connected. The analogy is training a dog. So AI and the skill sets around AI are a lot like training a dog. We all think we can train a dog, but actually most people don't know how to train a dog. It's a very discrete set of competencies, but you can learn it. And then once you've learned it, the ability, just as you say, to be more creative around what you can do with it is what will be the differentiator. And so that goes back to the education. How are you educated in? Does your educational process encourage you to be able to express things succinctly, to work in groups, iterate to solutions, and so on? But it was fascinating because that's exactly, he was talking about how the demand, their hiring demand is actually going to stay stable, but they're hiring for different skill sets.